attorneys that would like to speak.
Your Honor, I would indicate that people have no additions, corrections, or deletions to the pre-sentence investigation of the court. And the victim's daughter and son are present with other family members. The daughter would like to make a statement on behalf of her daughter.
She is, I don't want to mispronounce her last name before. It's good to read. It's good to read. It's good to read.
Yes, I'm Greg Cortis' daughter, and this is my brother, Greg Cortis. The other Greg Cortis.
Yes.
Your Honor, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with the court on my father, Gregory Allen Cortis, his beloved dog, Carly, and how his murder and Carly's vicious beating has devastated our family. Before I do that, though, I would like to thank the prosecutor's office, degree in education technology with a specialization in andragogy, which is just a fancy word for adult learning. I also have a Bachelor of Science degree in business administration. I have served professionally in academia as adjunct faculty, curriculum development, managing director of a college, and as the director of regulatory operations for over 14 function. He learned to eat and speak again, although his speech was impaired and some food would end up on the floor for the dogs. He still wasn't miserable. After his last stroke in July of 2015, 5 months before he was murdered, he was sent home with a prescription for a walker. He told me not to buy one because, good news, Dad, I already have one. I bought it for Yvonne's sister. She's going to live with us. Despite being incapacitated, he was not miserable, as Yvonne said, as to the reason for his murder. Our dad was dedicated to and loved our family. He was faithfully and kindly married to our mother for 35 years before she succumbed to cancer. Together they made sure we were loved, educated academically, experientially, and in the Word of God. When I had my older son, he became the most loving grandfather, and they were like two peas in a pod. He never had the chance to meet or have a relationship with my youngest son, as I was 6 months pregnant when Yvonne murdered him. My older son misses his grandfather terribly, and we talk about my dad frequently. My son was in 3rd grade when this happened, and a kid in his class had shared with him that his grandfather was murdered. And so you can imagine the restorative health plan we had to create and execute to restore emotional health again for a then 8-year-old whose grandfather was brutally murdered. On to Carly. Carly was the most loving dog. She was always happy, and despite her advanced age, she also was not miserable. Even after she had been beaten mercilessly, she did her best to recover with the assistance of the kind veterinarian staff and foster family. She was able to walk and smile again. She, like my dad, lived the motto, slowly but surely. Carly never met a person or biscuit that she didn't like. She didn't deserve to die. Neither of them deserved to die. Elderly and disabled people and animals deserve our love and compassion, not to be viciously beaten and murdered. When Yvonne entered our lives, she brought with her chaos, anger, and violence like our family had never known or knew what to do with. Prior to the attack of our dad and Carly, she had threatened, abused, stalked, and assaulted my dad, my brother, and I on numerous occasions. We had reported these incidents to the people that we thought would be the most help to us, including but not limited to the police, adult protective services, hospital staff, lawyers, and the probate court. Unfortunately, because Yvonne is a liar and a master manipulator, and my dad's fear of Yvonne killing him, hurting the dogs, burning down the house, or that she would get in trouble, we were failed. He was right for the fear. She did kill him, and she did hurt one of the dogs. Can you imagine living with someone who exaggerated and exacerbated your condition, didn't take you to the hospital when you had strokes, abused you and your family, wished you were dead, and ultimately viciously killed and beat you and your beloved dog? I wish that I could say that his murder was a surprise. Those closest to my dad were upset by the brutality of it, but no one was surprised. As we all know, actions speak louder than words. The brutal crimes that Yvonne committed have been devastating to us. The kindest thing she did for her family was to take a plea deal so they would not hear through testimony or see what she did through crime scene, hospital, and autopsy photos. I cannot convey to you the terror, fear, and sickness I felt when the officers arrived at my house at 4 a.m. to tell me that Yvonne had beaten my dad and Carly a 3-foot piece of rebar. I physically shook and cried while he shared that my dad had been airlifted to the hospital and Carly to the emergency vet. When I arrived shortly thereafter at the hospital and took my first glance, I fell on the floor. As I stated earlier, I was 6 months pregnant at the time. The nurse had to help me up and put me in a chair. My dad was on life support. His head was completely misshapen from being beaten in. His skull, facial bones, and jaw were all broken. His brain was irreparable. He had a large, approximately 4-inch length laceration to the left side of his head that required staples. Part of his ear was missing. His head and torso were covered in blood, even though he had been stitched up and bandaged. His arm bones had been broken in half and through the skin as he had put his arm up to cover himself from the blows. His jaw was being held in place by the life support vent and a neck collar. His torso was beaten and bruised, and his urine output bag was filled with blood. It was terrifying, gruesome, and forever. He never recovered from the violent attack, and he passed away. We had tried to recover from the murder and the abuse. We had a murder victim support group and tried to go back to life as we know it. It's ridiculously hard. We will never be free from what we saw and what we know. With Yvonne firing multiple lawyers, this process has dragged on for over 2 years. We have lived with unexplainable grief, fear, post-traumatic stress, nightmares, anxiety, and the unknown for over 730 days. We have learned more about Yvonne and the crimes she committed than we ever wanted to know. We will never be the same, but we work diligently to remain kind, loving, and personally accountable as our parents taught us to be. Although certainly, we are not the same as we once were. At the end of the day, our dad and Carly are gone, and we cannot bring them back. We will never talk to, see, or hug them again. My sons will never have their grandfather as part of their life. Yvonne alienated almost every single family member from my dad the very best way she could. We had to see and talk to our dad behind her back. He loved to meet us at a halfway point for lunch, or he would come out to visit my son. To call him, we would call his cell phone, let it ring once, hang up, and that was his signal to call us back when Yvonne wasn't home. She tried to control all of us instead of just controlling herself. That's all she had to do, control herself. If she was miserable, all she had to do was get in one of the 5 cars that were registered, licensed, and insured at the time of my dad's death and go to her home that she owned in Canada, the home that was not included in the estate that she had drawn up and he signed almost exactly 1 year to the date of his death, in which she was left everything. She certainly didn't have any problem abandoning him any other time, sometimes for a week, other times up to months. Instead, she chose to blame everyone: her parents and upbringing, her family, her ex-husbands, my dad was her third, our family, the conservator and guardian, and her co-workers for her unhappiness. She chose to beat and murder 2 beings who were loved. She chose to be a murderer, an animal abuser, a pathological liar, a chaotic manipulator, an adulterer, a thief, and an addict. Actions speak louder than your words. The Yvonne you saw in her mugshot is the predator that our family knows. This was not a mercy killing or self-defense. In our eyes, it was a predatory killing. My dad was a kind and forgiving person. Perhaps he would have forgiven Yvonne already for the crimes committed against he and Carly, as he had forgiven her so many times before. Most likely not, because she hurt his dog. We do not feel that forgiveness is ours to give. What we pray for is that Yvonne lives out the remainder of her life in prison, learns to accept responsibility for herself and her actions, and is no longer a danger to society. At the end of the day, our dad and Carly are gone, and we cannot bring them back. We will never talk to, see, or hug them again. My sons will never have their grandfather as part of their life. In conclusion, I thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share our love of and our grief for our dad and Carly, and our gratitude for all of you who are here and who helped us along the way.
Thank you for your meeting.
Your Honor, I just want to respond to the defendant's comments in the PSI and to the statements or letters that were sent by 3 family members in front of the defendants. Not 1, but 2 people examined the defendant, both someone from the forensic center as well as an independent doctor, and she was found not to be criminally responsible. This does not have anything to do with some kind of mental illness. Both doctors said she was not mentally ill at the time that she assaulted Carly and murdered her husband. This is not battered woman syndrome. This is not a case where she was a battered woman. The defendant requested from the court monies for an expert, an independent expert, to evaluate whether or not she suffered from battered woman syndrome. The expert said she did not, her own expert. And the court knows from the hearing that we had in regards to the admissibility of evidence under MRA 8034, MRA 404B, and MCL 768.27B, the numerous instances of domestic abuse and violence by the defendant against the victim that we know of from writings of the victim as well as statements by the defendant. The defendant indicated in her statements to the probation agent that she had attempted suicide that night. Your Honor, I have a photograph that was taken in the rear of the patrol car minutes after this incident, where she claimed to probation that she attempted to cut her throat. She had no injuries, none. She's not even crying in the photograph. This is a defendant who acted out of her own selfish interests because she had a dog that was old that she didn't want, that she didn't want to care for. Because she had a husband who suffered from physical disabilities due to his many strokes. Because she had recently suffered the complete loss of control of any monies of this victim. Because the probate court had recently ordered Attorney John Young to act as the victim's guardian and conservator. And Mr. Young had advised her and her husband that he would be taking responsibility for all incoming monies, all bank accounts, and all bills. The day before this incident, she told a co-worker that she had these problems with her husband and mentioned hitting him and killing herself. And when the co-worker came to her on the day of this incident, worried about her and asking her if everything was okay, the defendant's response was, yeah, I'm going to take care of it. I know what you have to do. This is not an incident where this man had been abusing her and she was afraid for her life. She claims in the PSI that he was asleep in the next room. That's contrary to statements that she made to the police that he was upstairs. And the photographs we have from the crime scene show that they had both been upstairs asleep in the bed. The bed covers were pulled down on both sides of the bed. This is a man who heard his dog crying and came downstairs because she was beating the dog to death. And as she told the officers at the scene, he never had time to say or do anything. She turned that metal 3-foot bar on her husband and struck him repeatedly. Not once, like she claimed in her plea, but repeatedly. He had over 15 injuries to different parts of his body on multiple planes of his head. Physically impossible for that to have been caused by one blow. And as his daughter indicated, his arm was broken, the bone through the arm, from him putting up, acting in self-defense. And Your Honor, I believe he fell to the floor and never got up again because the blood evidence at the scene never goes up above the seat of that cushion of the couch next to where he was found laying down. So she hit him, he fell to the floor, and she kept him. Your Honor, we do have a sentence agreement in this case of 22 years. I'm asking the court to adopt the PSI to follow that sentence recommendation. I would ask the court to also include not just no contact with Barbara Katubi and her brother Gregory Cortis Jr., but also no contact with their spouses and their children now and in the future, to protect them. Your Honor, I'm asking the court to sentence the defendant to the 22 years as agreed between the parties.
Thank you. Mr. Claus? Mr. Claus, I want to make both sides aware that I have received numerous letters from the family of the defendant and the victim, and I have read every single one.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, we do have a sentence agreement, but I do feel compelled to a couple things. During the past years of their marriage and their living together, was obviously it's not a harmonious situation. And I do think I need to address a couple things. Yes, Yvonne did petition probate. She also consented to someone else handling the matters for Mr. Cortis, because you recognize that there were some physical issues. Unfortunately, Ms. Cortis did have some mental health issues that required therapy herself. In 2012, she had a situation where she was confined to an inpatient for a period of time. I don't think there's much doubt about the fact that during at least the last 6 months to a year, while we were living together before this incident, she was self-medicating. I think that's pretty obvious from the pre-sentence report. Things were not good. What happened does not reflect entirely on who Ms. Cortis was or how she lived her life, and I think that's evident with regard to the letters. A lot of the things she did to earn an income was caretaking. There are letters that were provided to the court that she was compassionate, caring, pleasant, comforting. None of that matches what happened that particular evening. There's no doubt about that. This is a very, very sad case. Someone doesn't get to their age of 58 and then all of a sudden become a monster. There were outside influences at play. She snapped, and to be perfectly frank, she lost it. As to how many times Mr. Cortis was assaulted, I don't think it matters. I think there's a difference of opinion between Starnes and I. However, that doesn't really matter either. Unfortunately, a man undeservedly lost his life. She recognizes that, and that's why she entered the plea. She acknowledged her culpability. And one day I know her hope is to be able to see her family on the outside.
All right, Ms. Cortis, would you like to address the court? I'm going to ask you to keep in mind that I have reviewed all of the evidence in this case, including hours of videotapes, and autopsy photos, and photos at the hospital, and photos at the scene.
Barbara, Gregory Jr., family and friends. I'm terribly sorry for this pain. You're so grateful because my actions, your peace has been stripped away. The thought of your pain makes me grieve. I pray God will help you overcome the hardship you're enduring because of me. Because of Greg's illness, his world was very confused and distorted. His behavior was very abusive. I'd always forgive him because of his diseased mind. I began to lose sight of reality at times myself. Abandoning Greg wasn't an option. I told he wouldn't have leave me if it were turned around. I cared, love, and compassion for Greg and Carly. I tried to do my best I could, really, with the situation I was dealt with. It was not intentional. I'm empty and I'm just sweat. And I hope you guys forgive me. I'm very sorry. My friends, thank you for coming to support me. I love my family and they know my heart. That I wasn't the monster they created me to be. I wasn't that person. Something took over my mind that night. I couldn't see Carly suffer anymore. And I'm so sorry everything started from that. I didn't have time to react, but I can't explain how I went to that night, because I remember swinging at Greg, but I don't remember anything after that. And Greg never deserved any of this. He was a good man, except he would tell the family stories and it wasn't even true. And they believed all these mixed up stories, and I never did none of these things, and I couldn't believe how he wanted to divorce me all these years. And I'm like, Greg, I never cheated on you, please. I know it's because you had all your strokes. And he didn't understand it. And I forgave him over and over. God, please help me. I didn't know how to get this. Greg was not a monster, but he was very abusive in his own ways, and I didn't know where to go for help. Nobody would come. I would tell the family that there was a problem, and nobody believed me. Nobody was around to even see their father. They only came around when it was Christmas, holidays, whatever. I did all their meals. I did everything for these kids. I gave up my family in Canada for this family, and I gave them the best. I took care of my grandson when he was just born, and for 2 years we never had a problem. I never had one argument with my stepkids. All these lies, I believe, they saw this distortion of my husband, and I wasn't this person that they accused me of being. Yes, I took my husband's life, and he did not deserve it. He did not deserve it because he was sick, and I never wanted to call the authorities because he was picked up and put in jail. And I never trusted him that night. After that night, he almost killed me. Every time he would come after me, I would run out of the house to neighbors, wherever I could go. I'd go to Canada to get away from him because he wanted to hurt me because he believed in his mind I was going to hurt him, and I never, ever laid a hand on my husband, never. I swear on a stack of Bibles, God knows my heart, I never touched the man. I only ran from my husband. And I'm deeply sorry that his family believes that I did all this and I was this monster, but I wasn't. I was good to my husband, right to the end. I didn't want to see Carly suffer more. She needed to be put down and he wouldn't allow me to put her down. I was with Carly and Greg for 10 years. And I would never abandon him because Greg was very ill-minded. He was physical, he was strong, and he was good-hearted to me. He gave me a good life. But there was another side of him that made my life mental. And I'm so sorry to the family, Barbara and Greg, and to Jack. He doesn't have his grandpa. The poor guy, he loved his grandpa. The daughter would never bring him around because we were talking to his father, who was her ex-husband, and she punished us and didn't want to come and see us, and that was her excuse why she didn't come over. It wasn't that I was abusing her. I never abused Barbara, never. If anything, she would call me after she left her husband for another man, and I told her, you have to be calm. It was nothing they said. My character was not what they explained it to me. It was one accident that night. It took over my feelings. That's what happened.
Well, the interesting thing to me, Ms. Cortis, is you betrayed yourself as a victim in here and in your statement to probation. And I reviewed all of the evidence in this case for the last 2 years. All the evidence, the pictures, the statements, the hours and hours of videotape, people's history, including contacts with the police and witness statements, all of those things. And despite the fact that Mr. Cortis is not here to say anything to the contrary, there is not a scintilla of evidence to support your claim that you were a victim of anything at all. Not a scintilla. Zero. It's clear that you previously abused your husband. It is clear from the evidence that you previously abused your husband. It's clear from the police reports. It's clear from the witness statements. And it's clear that you viciously attacked your husband, a stroke victim, and his helpless dog. May God forgive you. But it is the sentence of this court. I am bound by the sentence agreement in this matter that with regard to count 1, the reduced charge of second-degree murder, it's the sentence of this court that you served 22 to 50 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections with credit for 764 days. And with regard to count 2, killing and or torturing an animal, 2 to 4 years with Michigan Department of Corrections, credit for 764 days. There's a crime victim's rights fee of $130, attorney fees to be determined, court costs $500, state costs $136. You already have no contact with Barbara Katubi or Greg Cortis for their spouses or children. Did we already do DNA? Did I leave anything out? Did I leave anything out?
Like to
Could you give Ms. Cortis her health rights? All right, I'd like everybody to remain seated. All right?
Judge, acknowledge receipt, and I am providing it to
Oh.